So why don't we get started? Is that okay with you, Ellen?
Yeah.
So it's just about time, 12:17 or whatever. So we're really honored to have Ellen McGrattan speak to us today at our working group, Economic Policy Working Group is called. And Ellen has a long time familiarity with Stanford, getting her PhD, or not that many years ago.
Yesterday.
Just yesterday.
I signed your thesis.
There you go. Okay. A lot of people responsible right here.
Yeah. Okay, there's the other co-author.
Okay, welcome. You don't have, only one of your co-authors has a sign there. Mr.
Yeah,
Martellini.
the other's in the Fed.
Anyway.
He's at the Fed.
So Ellen is at the University of Minnesota. She's the director of the Heller-Hurwicz Institute,
Economics Institute.
Economics Institute there. And
Just
that's a
stepping down.
long-term relationship with the Fed, the Minneapolis Fed. And we're delighted that she can speak to us about this important topic on business transfers and however you want to put that in the context, Ellen. So welcome. It's good to have you here.
Thank you. And let me start by saying my two brilliant co-authors are online there, so they can correct any mistakes I made, Anmol Bhandari and Paolo Martellini. I also want to say that before I begin and start flashing slides, that the theory we're going to develop in this paper, I want you to be thinking, like we're going to be thinking about sales of private businesses. I want you to think about businesses where the owners they have, an active management position in the firm. So think of, S corporations and partnerships and sole proprietorships where the owners are actively managing the business.
Muffler shops.
Muffler shops. Yeah, there you go.
Heart of.
That's the heart of the economy. Muffler shops.
Yeah.
I don't know what Facebook is, so.
Twitter.
Oh, Facebook.
Or Meta,
No.
whatever it's called.
Meta. No, Meta will be,
Is it about the private ownership, the closely held ownership, or about the owner?
It's going to be so. I'm going to motivate more deeply the details, but I want you to think about transfers between owners that are doing a similar thing. And like I said, I'll motivate more. I just want to kind of put that vision in your mind, and I'll motivate why we think these businesses are interesting and relevant. And I'll motivate why we need a new theory, why we can't just grab what's off the shelf. I also want to say before I start that there's parallel work going on with this project to analyze administrative data on business sales and the businesses before and after the sale, which is going on at the IRS through the Joint Statistical Research Program. So I'll talk a little bit more as we go why they're interested in this. All right. So let me start by saying that why are privately owned firms relevant? Well, they account for a lot of business activity in the U.S. They're actually a little more than half now. I think that we're a little out of date there. Also, these are the central characters for discussions of growth. They're the central characters for discussions of wealth and tax, any kind of tax policy. And as I said, there's a joint mission to this project, which is at the IRS. And of course, they're interested in tax compliance. So there's always the tax compliance issue, since private firms are deeply private and, you don't see very much. And that then leads to, the point on the slide, which is because they're deeply private, they're really a challenge. Even though there are a lot of the activity in the US, we don't see much. So having access to the administrative data is both a gift and a curse. So in this paper, we're going to propose a theory of firm dynamics and capital reallocation. I'll motivate why we need something new, and that'll be after kind of looking at the data, why our current theories need to be updated a little bit. I'll characterize properties of competitive equilibria. I'll show you how we're going back and forth with the IRS data, but I'm going to put a little caveat there that that's still very much in progress. It's just, sorting through the millions of datum is a lot of work. So that's kind of being done in parallel. And then I'll show you how we're using the theory. I mean, ultimately, the very penultimate thing would be to think about, redesigning tax policy, redesigning tax administration. But in the meanwhile, I want to show you kind of what this theory, what the predictions are for business transfers, wealth, and impact of certain kinds of taxation, like capital gains, that where it's relevant.
Can I ask you a basic question?
Of course.
From an econ point of view, rather than a macrofinance point of view or corporate finance point of view,
Mm-hmm.
why the corporate structure of a firm, in particular, whether it is or not privately held, matters?
It's not the private public part. It's more the theory. The most relevant thing for our theory is that there's an owner, and a bit like that the owners aren't just you and I holding passive shares in the business.
It's like an entrepreneurial model. I mean,
Like an entrepreneur. Right? So I didn't use the word entrepreneur, but
I noticed.
well, because it means so many different things to different people. I really mean like owners who are actively managing, and they're not necessarily the, Mark Zuckerberg, who happens to be the CEO and used to, run a smaller business that was private. But really, I want you to have in mind, like the tax accountant, the dry cleaner, the muffler shop, the restaurant. There's a huge number of businesses out there where, what the owner is doing is kind of the box we want to unpack.
So if I take my definition of entrepreneur, which is a founder, business owner, and manager, your definition includes individuals who don't necessarily have founded their own firm.
Right. They might have bought it.
Okay.
And we're going to talk about the actual transfer, which could be through a sale. And that's what we're having in mind. So it'll help us think about how capital gets reallocated in the economy when those sales occur. All right, so let me start with what we know. The first thing is, and this is something that my co-author Anmol and I discovered not by looking at the IRS data, but by looking at data from brokered sales. A lot of the assets in private business that get transferred when there's a sale are intangible in nature. I'm going to show you one of these forms that would be filled out that we would see at the IRS, so you can see what's on that form. But the form is going to show you that the intangible asset share is on the order of 60%. So they're not selling tables and chairs. They're not selling buildings. They're selling intangible assets. This is the form, and unfortunately, for those of you in the room, you will not be able to read this form. Sorry about that. So let me just kind of give you a sense of what it is. This is a form that gets filed by a business seller and a business buyer. Both have to file it separately so that it can be compared and checked. They fill in whether they're the buyer or the seller and their own information. And then they take the sales price and they have to break it up into pieces. Okay, how much of the assets? Why? Because there's going to be capital gains assessed, and then there's going to be assets put on new books and therefore amortized or depreciated. So you need to keep track of both things. And they'll list the total price, and then it'll be broken down. You can see the things I typed onto the thing, which hopefully are readable. There might be some cash and securities. There will be tangible asset like inventories and fixed assets. And then there will be these things called Section 197 intangibles. And let me show you. Oh, and at the bottom, there will also, I should point out, there will be questions asked. One nice thing about looking at administrative data, if you fill out your tax form and put yes to one of these questions, like, yes, I did make a contractual agreement with the buyer and or seller, they write down details of that. So we can see more things in these notes. which is kind of nice. The assets, I'm giving you a list here of the primary things that would be listed. They would be customer bases, client lists, if you're a doctor, patient lists, non-compete covenants, which would be, an agreement not to set up, if you're the muffler shop, I'll use your muffler shop, not to set up another muffler shop right next door and grab all your old customers. So there will be an agreement like that. Like any kind of licenses or permits, if you run a bar and you have a license, that could get transferred. Franchises, trademarks, and trade names. Workforce in place. When you buy the other person's business, you might be buying a trained workforce. The IT and know-how, so there are systems that are already in place. And then the residual would be goodwill. So, any kind of brand loyalty, things that, you're not going to go to court and fight over, like a covenant or a license. So all those things we're seeing listed or sold, and these are accounting for most of the value of the business.
Ellen,
Yeah,
how much can we trust the numbers?
great
I
question.
see comments about.
That's a great question. I know. So they would be in conflict because, one wants it to go, yeah.
They have mutual incentives to mess up the number.
If it were a daughter and a mother or a father and a son, I'm sure they could figure out ways to.
What's the matter? There's a price, you pay capital gains on the price, and that's the basis of the new guy, but it doesn't matter what it's split up as, does it?
Well, if you could amortize or depreciate faster, you would try to do it.
Oh, so you would call it kinds of assets that then you get to depreciate later.
Yeah, so that's where the fooling around can go. And yeah, so there are people who, so if anything, we're on the low side of the intangibles because they would try to get it into other categories. Yeah, but yeah.
So there's the famous BEA multiplier of 1.9 to go from reported numbers to numbers in the national income account.
So we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to looking at, because we're going to want to look at financials of businesses. And as many of you know, the reason IRS is interested in these kind of businesses, yes, there's a ton of misreporting of income. In fact, in the BEA numbers, half of the proprietor's income is imputed, and it's because of misreporting. And I want to talk about that later, so I'll bring it back up.
It's not just misreporting, it's underreporting.
Underreporting, that's right. Yeah, they don't say, hey, tax me more, please, please. Okay. So what else? So we know that they have a lot of these intangibles that you're not going to go and rent your client list out there in the market or pledge it. Another thing we know, and by the way, I'm going to give you kind of the things we know and how it'll inform how we write down the theory. That these things, the assets are being sold as a group. So they're selling the whole business off. It's not that they're doing little piece by piece.
And sorry, and then the treatment of the different categories of intangibles from a tax standpoint is homogeneous.
In terms of amortization, it wouldn't matter whether you called it this identifiable thing like a non-compete or it won't matter but if you were going to court it, you would want an agreement, something like that. But from the tax side, that's why they put it as class. They just put one number. Now we're interested in breaking that number up because it helps us with measurement. And so I can talk after about like ways you would get at those different subcategories. Okay, so sorry, so that they're being sold as a group, that we see from the tax filings. And then that it's a time, it takes time. This we know from the brokered deals that we saw before that it was on average 290 days. You don't see in tax data like, oh, it took us this long, but there is auxiliary evidence to get some sense that these things take a while. So we're going to be trying to build in these features into the theory because most models out there don't have this. So these are going to be the kind of three features we want to build into the theory. So today I'm going to talk about how we build them in. So we're going to write down a theory with indivisible capital, bilaterally traded intangibles, if you like, requiring time to reallocate. We'll characterize the equilibrium, who's trading with who, how are the terms of trade determined, what are the properties of equilibria. I'm going to be working with a baseline just as a preempting, so not to, say it after the fact. There will be a baseline case where we have transferable utility, so linear utility function. We're going to show that things are efficient. There's not going to be financing issues. So for all of those who think about, there's this big issue with financing the capital for the business. That's not in what I'm going to present today, but that's kind of on our back burner of things to think about. So today we're going to be looking at what I would say is kind of the very nice baseline case where we can actually characterize the equilibrium cleanly.
Bilateral, it seems like it's basically an auction market. It's like a house. You put your business on a market, and then there's brokers active in that market.
Yeah, so there are things like I have a student looking through like BizQuest, where you could post. A lot of these guys will go through, or businesses will get brokered. The sale will be brokered, but we're going to model it like as if everybody's going. There's an opportunity for you to go into a room and sell your business to a bunch of potential partners. So that's coming.
So that'll be an auction.
It's not. There's not really an auctioneer calling out, but maybe the mathematics works similarly. I don't know.
Is there a set of facts or puzzles you're after?
It's not here's my 3 facts, I'm going to write a model and explain them kind of paper. It's we need a theoretical framework to start thinking about some issues, and we don't have that on the shelf. It's a first step towards having good predictive tools for certain questions, some of which are going to be dealing with the tax compliance, some of which are going to be dealing with thinking about a tax policy design. But this is not here are my 3 facts.
But this last bullet is one of the policy questions you're trying.
Yeah, there's going to be. So one thing, what we're going to do with it is that we're going to show you we're going to characterize the equilibria in this world. So what would it look like? And then that is helping us have a good framework for going and looking at IRS data. And then we'll use it to show, what would we see for kind of some common questions out there, like what is the wealth in the private business sector? And I'll give you some estimates. And I'll give you an estimate. I'll show you that you can actually use our framework to think about capital gains tax, because there's something to tax. In other words, like standard theory that abstract from these things being transferred, what is it you're taxing? I can't tax the Z that's on your head.
Elena,
Yeah.
So it sounds like you're thinking of private businesses that then they're traded by someone else that remain private.
That's typical, yeah.
Is there not also big conglomerates that buy private?
Yes, there are.
Essentially, they go public.
There
It's
are.
a decision of whether to go private or public.
But it's all private equity, not publicly traded equity.
Well, there are. Let's go back. There are going to be C corporations that would buy an S.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not.
And the difficult thing. So right now, I would say what I'm about to show you, it doesn't fit nicely in that framework, because those would be. We needed capability in something we don't already do. And this is going to, and I'll show you the framework this is going to be more like, you're a dentist, I'm a dentist. And I'm giving you stuff, I'm going to be passing on things you need to do what I was doing. Whereas I think what you have in your mind, or some people have in their mind, like Disney buys, or let's go, Facebook buys WhatsApp. Okay, and that was a C corporation buying an S corporation, or maybe it was a C. I don't even know. here we're really trying to think about these assets that get transferred and the owners who are building that. Not you already have 1 million owners and they have nothing to do with this business. Not that that isn't fascinating. It's just you'll say, this doesn't seem like a model of that.
Ellen, you seem to be dismissing in mufflers.
I'm not dismissing mufflers.
Mufflers, sorry. In mufflers, and a great many businesses like mufflers, which is what the heart of what you're talking about.
Yeah.
There's a process called a roll-up,
Mhm.
where the same private equity entity, and it's always private. It's never a publicly traded entity. It's always private. But it's billions of dollars of money being spread around, buying up independent muffler shops and branding them and running them as a
Right. So like Bain Capital comes in and buys up all the muffler shops. That's a great question. I have not yet. So I'm like the guy who sits at the kiosk inside the vault. I haven't yet gotten under the hood of that. I've looked more at the businesses to businesses going through the 8594, but there is another form, and I'm going to sorry to be nerdy, but I know Bob will appreciate it. There's the 8883, and that has yet to be explored, and to look at exactly
that's where a buyer is
they're going to do some stock trades.
a C corp,
There's a C corp that'll come in and
typically not.
but it could be private.
equity.
Yeah.
But to follow up, I was thinking the same. So what's different between your framework and option? And you feel free
I
to
don't know.
postpone.
I'm not saying there's anything different.
not
I'm
meaning-
just saying I haven't studied.
Is it gonna be important, any notion of frictional aspect to the matching between the buyers and the seller? That's what you want to capture with this bilateral trade, or the information is embodied in the
There's-
parties negotiating eventually?
There still would be some searching for these, right, and brokering these. It wouldn't be that Bain Capital knows, whoop, I know I can grab every muffler shop. So there would be still. So I don't want to say it's not relevant. Our theory's not relevant. But I have to say I know they exist. I haven't studied them.
Ask one
Of
other
course.
thing. I think a fact you could calculate that I haven't seen elsewhere, but you've got great data to do it, is it seems like intangible capital includes two kinds of capital, like things that are ones and zeros. You could think of like patents or brands or copyrights, things that if you are scalable, you could just scale them up and you wouldn't lose anything. So infinitely usable or non-rival. Whereas like the customer base and the workforce, those things don't have that property. So it might be interesting to know like what fraction of intangible capital is the stuff that can scale up and what fraction's the kind that, if you scale it up, it gets diluted,
Yeah.
right?
Fabulous question. And that's kind of some of the stuff in the kiosk going on in the kiosk now is to think about, like, for example, tracking the workers so we can do the workforce in place. In other words, peeling back the total number to get the sub pieces.
Yeah.
And going through those notes, using AI software to sift through those notes and get what is it that's actually being traded. So that's exactly, I would love to wave my magic wand and have that all done, but it's going to take a little bit of work. But I agree with you because the non-rival nature is very different than the rival.
Let me just interrupt. People that are in outer space, wherever you are, can raise your hand. We'll see you and ask questions. So don't hesitate.
Will we see them?
yeah,
They're
can you
so
see them?
little. No, not very well.
We'll
They're-
recognize you if you have a question.
I mean, they
anyway.
look like a little dot, so I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, they're intangible.
All right, so let me jump to the theory. But again, please, I know I don't have to tell this group that you guys will jump in and ask questions. So here, let me do the helicopter view. So infinite horizon with continuous time. I will say preempt. We could also think about the life cycle of a firm. Right now, we're doing infinite horizon, but as we track the owners who retire or exit or whatever. We're going to try to be thinking about some life cycle issues that's coming up. It's not here. We're doing infinite horizon. There's going to be a business type. We're going to index it by S. So there's a Z, that's the non-transferable, stuff that's stuck on the head of the person. Think of that as their productivity. Kind of think Lucas span of control. And then there's going to be transferable and accumulable capital. And some stuff that you might think is stuck on their head would, in our framework, go into kappa because it does get transferred. Like some of these sales, we see them pass on knowledge. Part of the agreement is a human capital handoff. So we do see a transfer of what would look like owner-specific stuff, but it's transferable.
Observables or unobservables? The types.
Well, we'll see. Like what I'm trying to say is some aspects that you might think is only in Z is actually in kappa. It's the knowledge getting passed on because they come to work for the business in the transition period, or they might do introductions to clients, or they might do these things. These things we see in the notes.
But the model agents, the business type is observable. Sorry, I have a local level question.
So you mean
the Z and K are observable and kappa are observable?
You know your own type.
Yeah.
If you're going in for a sale,
yeah,
there'll be you're matching up with you know what you're matching up with.
And my partner will see that.
Yeah. In a sale, you'll know. Okay, so then the key decisions for owners. This is just a roadmap for myself. I'm going to show you the production, their investment, and how and what the transfers look like. So production is standard. I lay this out specifically to include what looks like labor, but it's really all external factors. When we go and look at data, obviously we're going to see them spending on capital, labor, materials. Here, I've just maxed those out because they're just external rentable factors. And then the not rentable part is the kappa. So I'm, maxing out the rentable part. And the idea being that the Z hat is the owner specific stuff and the kappa is the self-created intangibles.
So there's a Z without a hat. That's the same as the.
That has the see how that has the
Accumulating all the labor decision.
Yeah. Well, not labor, external factors.
Sorry.
Yeah, get this right. Okay, so that's production, and then let's talk about the firm dynamics. So that involves entry and exit. Then there's going to be shocks to productivity, and then the new part, which is the investment and capital transfers of these intangibles. Okay, so I'm just going to introduce some notation. There's going to be we're going to have to specify an initial distribution of the types. There will be a cost to enter. There will be exit rate, delta. There will be shocks to productivity that are just exogenous. So one could extend this theory to allow for like endogenous human capital. Right now, this is just exogenous.
And common across S, the process. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, process is common. Yeah. So up to this point, this is Hoppenheim. And then next, I'm going to kind of modify the Hoppenheim. So the real question is going to be, what are the motives to transfer a business? There's going to be decreasing returns to scale. So owners the whole motive here is to build to your optimal size. And you can do that either through internal investment or business transfers. So if you do it through internal investment, there's going to be a convex cost, and that's going to determine obviously how the opportunity cost. And then some depreciation delta kappa. Ooh, I don't know what just happened there, but a lot of things just flashed before my eyes. Yeah, sorry, Bob, you had a question?
Yeah, on this diminishing returns, if returns are always diminishing, then you get this pinpoint equilibrium where it costs nothing to produce, and you have infinitesimally small firms. You must have. I mean, normally we get around that problem by saying that
So there's a built-in indivisibility here. I'm coming to it.
Oh, okay.
You're not going to be an infinitesimally small.
Sure.
Yeah.
And you're going to explain features of the model that.
Yeah.
Entry costs will do it, won't it?
Huh?
Entry costs will prevent that.
Oh, of course, sure.
Yeah, but you're not going to be able to whittle down. We're not going to have like marginal products of capital equated here because things are going to be in chunks.
Well,
Hold that thought.
So as this evolves, we'll figure out in what sense you meant that it's diminishing returns.
Oh, I just meant, sorry, that the production technology is, sorry, I hate doing this. Oops. Alpha not 1. That's all I meant. Nothing deep.
No, but alpha plus gamma, not 1, or?
Yeah, I mean.
Oh, I see. That's
Alpha,
alpha
alpha
plus
hat.
gamma. I got you. Okay.
So one solution, which I think Pete was getting at, is you could have cost be a constant plus a diminishing returns component. Then
Yeah, and the bilateral trade. So hold on a sec. You'll see in 1 minute. Sorry, I hate this go back thing, but all right. So the transfers can occur. There's a bilateral meeting rate, that's eta. That's going to be the frequency. That's going to be determined by the frequency of these businesses getting brokered. There will be an allocation. So think of S meeting an S tilde, and that's just you have a different bundle of the Z and kappa. We're in a room together. One of us, three things could happen. I take your business, you take my business, we go home and say no. Paolo and Anmol want everybody to know they have explored other things, but I think this is the natural thing because really it is like you're buying the whole lot.
What are some others you explored?
You don't want to go there.
One.
Paolo and Anmol, what are the others we've explored?
Okay, never mind.
John wants to know.
So, in some sense, here we are taking a stand that that there is like when you sell, you have to sell the whole business. What we're trying to capture is that it's costly to break down a business and manage to sell it. So what we have explored is costly splitting, where there's a cost of splitting a business, and this is an extreme version where the cost is infinity. So the only options are you sell the whole business or you buy the whole business.
But the other person already has a business. There's K and K of S tilde.
They have the transferable part. You can't walk off with their Z, but you can walk off with the transferable part.
But I guess their KS tilde could be 0.
Yeah,
which
it
is
could be.
They don't have a business.
There'll be a population of people with.
Yeah.
zero K.
Yeah.
It's not-
So there's a whole distribution of these S's, and
Okay.
there's going to be an equilibrium choice. Ooh, sorry.
So this specification is more than, so you can only sell the chunk. Well, once you sell it, it becomes joined with the other one. So
That's
now
right.
That one can't be split. You can't just have two businesses.
That's right.
Keep them running and then sell off.
That's right. That's right.
They're not like apples. They're like
Just two
apples that
separate
get mushed
individuals.
together.
They get mushed together. Somehow my mic is. I must have done something to this.
I mean, see if you could spoon out a spoon there.
Oh, and the other is that the intangible
It's
part,
again, you can't
you could imagine that the intangible part that you transmit mixes with the intangible part of the other in a way that's not linear. These are like perfect substitutes.
Yeah, these are, yes. And that's what he's saying is that they're exploring not just you glue them together. Yes.
Think about the economics.
Yes, and I think that goes back to the initial question of Chris about, there are different kinds of transfers where Disney buys Marvel, because Disney has a distribution
Right.
Capability, and Marvel knows how to make good things for 15-year-old boys or older.
So where is the fact that the new business has to have the new owner's skill and not the old owner's skill?
Say it again.
Sorry, I have to wear this.
Yeah, it's okay.
Where is the fact that the new business has to have the new owner's skill and not the old owner's skill? It looks like we're mixing the skills.
You would, the Z sticks with the owner.
Isn't Z part of S?
Yeah, and in a minute you'll see, there's going to be a result that, what matters is like the price will determine on the size of the kappa, and it's not going to be a function of the Z.
Wait, the way it works, the new company has the new owner's skill, not the old owner's skill.
Right. No. You have your own skill. The owner, I'm buying, let's do it again. You're muffler shop 1, I'm muffler shop 2. I'm going to buy your client list.
Yeah.
Okay.
But not my non-transferable.
But not your non-transferable Z.
Okay.
Yeah. Just the kappa. Okay, so here's the add it all up. So the dynamic program value includes the production. So this is where the non-transferable part is. If you, the transferable utility part is. This is where you would modify that if you wanted to add some curvature on there. And that's what we're exploring now. Then there's shocks to productivity. And then you've got the 2 decisions, the investment and the transfer. And the gain from the transfer I've written there at the bottom. And just to be clear, there is a distribution of potential partners. Okay, and that's the lambda. And so think of lambda as a choice and like a mixed strategy. So there's going to be a set of, and I'll give you an example to kind of make this super concrete, but there's going to be a probability over an S tilde match.
So transfer occurs if you sell the business, right?
If you sell the business. Yeah.
And why do we need transferable utility, not just transferable cash? I thought you sell a business.
The cash is that P. You see the P minus P there?
Okay.
That's the payment.
Oh, I see. So it's the change in value minus the payment. Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
And they can choose whatever lambda they want at no cost.
Yeah, that's what I didn't understand. Why do you choose over lambda if lambda is the distribution of potential partners? It's like you're searching, you're directed.
And I'm only gonna let high intangible people into meetings with me.
There would be multiple possible matches. And I'll show you an example where there's like an industry. Let me give you an example and you'll see exactly how
Not the usual
It's not.
labor matching.
No,
thing.
exactly. That's what I
No,
was thinking myself.
not the usual labor
The
matching thing.
probability eta dt is matched with a person, but it's not a person because then there's a subsequent.
It's like we're in a room, big room.
The probability eta dt, you go into the room and then you get to choose among the people in that room. Okay.
And there may be indeterminacies. That's what I'm going to show you. Yeah.
It seems like the natural setup here would be a Vickery auction where the winner is the person who places the highest value and pays the second highest, pays the price of the value of the runner-up.
Again, I'm going to have to see if the mathematics are the same.
But here everything's observable.
You insist that be the same?
Well, otherwise I would say it doesn't matter if we call what we called it.
Both skills are observable, right? So either value that the person puts on, you don't have to worry about second price auctions because we know what everything's worth to everybody.
The question is who's in the room, who do you match with? We don't know. That yet.
Exactly.
We haven't seen it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the auction could be like just a order statistic on how many people of this distribution, but because this distribution is still a free parameter, it could look like
Every auction problem is an ordered statistic problem.
Right.
Exactly.
So closing the model, there's going to be a free entry condition, which is standard. And then there's going to be some measure of entrance that we keep track of. And then, of course, we've got to add things up in terms of the fee is going to be the distribution of types. And here's how it evolves. It's just a black box here, but I didn't want to write out the whole big mess.
How is phi and G related? I thought G was the distribution of types.
G is the initial distribution of types. And then phi is the evolution of the types. So we can start them, and we're going to start them. We're going to try to use the data to start them out at 0, looking like they would look in data. Okay, here are the objects of the equilibrium. It's the usual, so I'm not going to dwell on since I'm at 1 o'clock already. But usual definition of equilibrium. I do want to say, because sometimes questions come up, how's this related to this or that? I mean, you could compare what we're doing to people who model like CES demand with monopolistic competition or frictional labor and asset markets. We're not putting those specific restrictions on our model, but we will get differentiated goods because these S's are, you're going to be, you're going to have a different allocation, even though it's a homogeneous good. There's going to be a rich heterogeneity in the participation market participants, and we'll be looking at that. I'll show you pictures, and then these matching sets will evolve. So we get those things without too much extra in the way of assumptions. All right, so let me characterize equilibria. I'm going to start with the example so that it'll help with, I think, the lambdas. So suppose you had 20, so now we're talking about the Z's. We have 20 with highs and 10 with low. And everybody has a transferable capital stock, kappa of 1. The efficient reallocation here would be the 10 low guys would sell to 10 of the high types. Okay? But so back to your question, Sebastian. Which 10 would be matched, right? I mean, that's, well, actually, I've got to put it. We know that, I'll come to that in a minute. We know the price is going to leave those guys indifferent. So the trading will occur. There will be kappa equal to post-trade. Those not trading will keep what they had in the post-trade. And if we look at the allocations and prices and choice probabilities, you're going to see, the 2, and then some end up with 0. The price will make them indifferent, the high types indifferent. And then these choice probabilities will be such that this allocation is achieved.
I got a little lost.
Yeah.
What's the price? I mean, there's a surplus here. Like if you have more talented than me, the business is worth more in your hands than my hands. So
yeah. So there's only 2 right now. I did something simple. There's just a low and a high. So low sells to high.
But is it a bargain?
Price at your reservation price, or at my reservation price?
No, but here's a competitive. There's
This is
more
just
on one side than the other, so the buyers have to be indifferent, and they have to be all the surplus to be extracted from them because there's more of them than the others.
Why?
So
It's still a bilateral meeting.
because you choose lambda.
You choose lambda.
How the math was set up. You could imagine a different setup, but that's not
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
You have to be indifferent. Yeah.
If there were more sellers than buyers, it would be the other way around in this setting.
But I also have already a question. So in terms of the timing, so this is a stationary equilibrium and the price is quoted before or after the shock? Sorry for the stupid question. I was lost at that level.
This is, it's not a posting. It's just there's a price that will equate.
But it's so within the timing, a period timing, how does it look like?
Well, so this is continuous time. There will be
at the same instant the productivity shock is
at some instant you're get sent in the room.
Okay.
And the room has everybody in it, or
it has those who got tapped.
But with probability eta dt.
At eta, that's right.
I got tapped, but
yeah.
There's measure 0 chance that anybody else got tapped at that time.
Well, there'll be, say, eta is 20%, so 20% of us will be in there.
This is a continuous time model.
Yeah.
This is a Poisson process.
Yeah.
For an instant being, I tap you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's I have the same question.
Then I don't, unless there's some commonality to the shock, nobody else got tapped.
But 20% of us got tapped, say.
Okay, with probability. Okay, there's a probability eta dt. Then we say some measure of everybody got tapped. They all go into the rooms. Okay, and then if there was multiple buyers and multiple sellers in the room, then.
Yes.
And then
so what the price is going to depend on the relative number of buyers.
Yes.
Who happen to get tapped.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can be a buyer or a seller in that room.
Is it common? It's not a common price though. Each business gets its own price, doesn't it?
Each business. Each match, there will be for each match a price. So for example, if in the room there are people with different allocations. So think of it as there's a whole distribution of us.
But I can't choose the max because somebody else might have sold to the smartest guy.
There's only 2 types here.
Well, in that simple example, there's only 2 types, but there's a continuum of types.
Could I get it?
Yeah. Yeah.
So in the IO literature and a lot of search literature too, this is called the Bertrand solution.
Mm-hmm.
So the surplus goes to the type that is in slightly less supply.
Mm-hmm.
So if you have 9 people, it's just what you said.
Mm-hmm.
If you have 10 people of one type and 9 of the others, the scarcer type gets all the surplus.
Mm-hmm. You like to put names to all these things, but
it's a helping.
okay.
That's to literature.
Yeah, you want to connect to the literature.
Yeah. Okay.
Can I say something here 1 second?
Yeah.
So this is really like that effectively. So imagine there are all these entrepreneurs with unit demand. So each firm, each K will be sold to the highest bidder. With the restriction that they can only either sell what they have or buy one. That's what makes it makes the accumulation slow, because you can buy them one at a time. But of course, the business will be sold to the buyer with the highest willingness to pay. So it's similar exactly to the auction in a way, but it's all full information.
Yeah.
Just to make sure we understand the math, the PM depends on the both types that are matched. So it's not like there's a price of the business who comes. It's price.
Yes.
How I'm interpreting the math. The math is there's always a latent price that if I were to sell to John, that would be the price. If I could do better by choosing a lambda that puts the weight on John instead of Ellen, and be better, then I would do that. That wouldn't be selling to Ellen wouldn't be an equivalent. So all the prices that are not realized are still there in the definition of equilibrium. That's
I've never read express as a price.
That's right.
I think so.
All right. So that's just a simple example. More generally, what we're going to be doing is when we go to the computer, we're going to be thinking about, okay, we have a measure of types and a value function. When we're answering our question, who trades with who, we're going to solve kind of statically a planner problem, which looks like an assignment problem. Kantorovich, there's a name. Solve a planning problem to get the total gain, maximize the total gains. So you come in with a phi and a v. You solve the planning problem to figure out what the trades are going to be, the optimal trades. Use the shadow prices from that planning problem to infer the prices, these P's, and then update. So it's like a dynamic program, but there's a very kind of standard planning problem, based on the assignment literature in the middle of this.
I guess Paolo is there. Sorry, one question. I was trying to think about this as a discrete time limit, because in some search and matching model, is the frequency which you observe a shock gets very small vis-a-vis the frequency which you undertake the action, which is in this case trading or not trading. Here, are you finding any convenience in the continuous time formulation and in the limit?
Well, so we've done both the discrete and the continuous. The answers, nothing changes conceptually or even like just how the results look, but the mathematics are simpler in the continuous.
That is the regular limit, so there's nothing that gets more frequent than something else that I should be worrying about.
Not that, maybe Paolo and Anmol have an answer to that, but I don't think so.
Your intuition, Elena, is correct that it's about how much variability there is in Z compared to how quickly you can adjust. You can do the same in discrete time, change the probability of meeting. The continuous time just says that every action is separate, so we can solve the model in a much more convenient way by just
exactly. That was trying to think. They must be giving you traction. Perfect.
But at the end of the day, our computer code is same speed. Am I right, Paolo?
Yeah, I think you should move on.
Yeah,
move on.
Let's move on. All right. So this is a side comment, and only for the nerds. This static planning problem that sits at the middle is like a standard linear programming problem a la Kantorovich. So this is kind of the thing that is being solved in the middle. We maximize the match surplus. We compute the total gains. We back out some multipliers. We're equating here social gains with private gains. These multipliers are a way for us to infer the shadow prices or the prices, and then we update the phi and the v. I should say this is kind of nice. This could be done even if we do the more complicated non-transferable utility. This module, this can be modified a lot, and we can solve problem. The inner piece can be solved separately from the dynamic piece, so the problem can be extended pretty easily. All right, properties of equilibria. So we're in a world where we can achieve, the competitive allocations maximize, this problem, which means that we're achieving full efficiency. The prices are independent of the Z. You're just buying basically a chunk of this capital. So same goods sold at same price. And the bilateral trades turn out to be pairwise stable. So, this whole discussion of the guys going off and doing some separate trade, it's not going to happen. They're not going to be made strictly better off. So those are the properties of equilibrium. And with my 15 minutes left, I want to talk about some of the quantitative results that would come out of this environment. Let me start with, in the final version of this paper, we're going to have everything, estimated based on a full information, the information we have from the IRS. But in the meanwhile, some of these numbers are standard. I'm going to focus just on the ones that are key for the trading, which are the bilateral meeting rates, the investment costs, and the returns to scale. Those we can think, pretty immediately about estimating those parameters, because we can look at frequency of business transfers. We can look at the ratio of the business price to seller income, the ratios of the buyers and sellers, because for example, the investment costs, that's important, and I probably say this on the next page, but that's important driver for who trades with who, and the returns to scale. Let's see if I say it here. For the terms of trade, and the returns to scale are going to be a key driver of who trades with whom. John?
Sort of a big picture that I lost while going through the model. So there's two ways we could think of arugula sales at Whole Foods. We could have supply and demand, or we could have a model where maybe my wife calls me in the afternoon with probability eta. Maybe she sends me to Whole Foods, maybe to Trader Joe's, maybe they have some arugula, maybe they don't. And so what do we get? You've kind of written down that kind of model, but you can also just say, well, there's the supply and demand. There's kind of a market for business sales.
There's not a thick market for, I am a dentist and I want this size dentist in this location with this kind of thing. And it's not like arugula.
Yeah, but so what are we going to get out of that insight? Just do businesses get sold? Does prices?
Oh, you're going to get, okay, so that's what's coming. You're going to get some understanding of the dispersion of, say, marginal products of capital, why we're not equating certain things.
The Pete Klenow heterogeneity of
Yeah.
businesses will come out. The puzzle.
Correct.
Why aren't all businesses efficient businesses? For example?
Yeah, so Shea and Klenow will get confused in our world, things like that.
It was an honest question.
Yeah, no, I wasn't debating you. But we do think of it as different than, there's arugula in 3 different places and you're just driving around to get the arugula.
Well, that would be a key kind of moment then, right? The kinds of moments that distinguish this model from just the standard perfectly competitive. I mean, there's a model for businesses. We don't see transactions that often, but it's pretty competitive. It's just supply and demand. Well, there'd be a puzzle. Why is there this big variation in quality of existing businesses?
Right. So the chunkiness is going to drive it. That's an important part. Whereas your arugula is stacked to the ceiling over in Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, and you know where to get it. So the chunkiness, just the sort of, the time of doing these deals, and that it's not a it's homogeneous in the model, but it's not really homogeneous.
IPOs, that kind of business transfer, we think of with a kind of a competitive market framework, even though it's chunky. So it's not always the chunkiness, it's the few people in the roomness of it.
Yeah, I think it's the duration, the time it's going to take to scale up. You're only allowed to buy one chunk at a time. And so if you want to get your capital to be 7 times your current capital stock because you're a super high Z person,
exactly,
it's going to take you a long time because you have to meet 17 people.
You really want, what you really want is to meet the guy, what did you say, 7 or 17? You want, if your optimal size is 7 times, you want that 7. You're looking for 7, because otherwise you're taking time to go 1, then another, then another.
The model gives you pretty, people moving around. But, the competitive model kind of abstracts from all that, says the auctioneer comes along, supply, demand, price, and we get 99% of what we want out of that. Without modeling, I went to the store and,
But I think if you saw the dispersion in the marginal product of capital, that would give you a sense. Like if the dispersion is really small, that's going to say, hey, it works out pretty well. Dispersion is huge. That might say these search costs are really high.
It still doesn't say for what question, like the policy relevant question, having that large or small dispersion is going to matter. I think it's if you want to value the business by looking at the transactions, they're going to be much more willing to buy the business if the next chance they have is a really long way away than if not. So I think if your core question is understanding sort of why are businesses valued as they are and how that would change if you tax them, sort of this seems to be important for what people are willing to pay to purchase them.
Where the dispersion in valuation come from is part of the question, I think.
Yeah, right. So that leads me into this showing. So I'm going to skip over like validation of the model and talk about what's coming out, what's popping out of this. Let me start with patterns of trade. So on the x-axis, I have, if we lined up sellers by their productivity, if we lined up buyers, and notice the sellers only go up to 25, the buyers go up to 60. So here's the mass. So if we simulate our economy and then we look at trades that are occurring, here, the size of the square is the mass of those trades. And it gives you a sense that, well, I think I put a title on that, gives you a sense of how you're getting the optimal reallocation to occur, because you're getting it, from the low productivity guys into the hands of the high productivity guys. And it gives you a sense of like the speed at which you're doing, how are they doing it? So it gives us a sense of, were they able to jump like Chris is describing or not? And obviously you can see just from the scaling that,
This is a simulation of the model. What is
it's a simulation of the model. Yeah. And then what we did was we plotted just the characteristics in terms of Z and then said, who would be trading with who? So it gives you a sense of those patterns and how the capital is going to be moving out of the hands of these low productive sellers and into the hands of the buyers, but they're going to have to go in sometimes in steps.
This is kind of like, it's not arugula. Because to what extent to understand the houses in Palo Alto do we need something beyond supply and demand?
It's similar to houses. More similar to houses than arugula, but I would say housing is still a little bit different. But we'll talk about that after.
People who value it little to people who value
it
a
a lot. If we think about comparing like how quote unquote, this isn't a misallocated world. It's just, it looks like one. If we compared to a first best, we'd get, again, here I'm putting productivity on the x-axis and the average capital for two different economies. One where there's, I should have said it, one where there's divisible capital and you've got perfect rental versus no rental. And then you're seeing this big gap in the average capital when we compare it relative to the productivity. If we were to estimate the business wealth in this world, so let's do two measures. I'm going to do the finance textbook and I'm going to do the SCF survey. The finance textbook would ask, what's the present value of the owner dividends? The SCF survey guy would say, if you sold your business today, what could you get? The model has counterparts to those. One is the V, that's the value of your whole future, and the other is these prices. That's that PM. But remember, in equilibrium, it's just a function of the kappa. And if we computed, here again, I'm going to do by productivity level. We computed the transferable share. So I'm going to take the price relative to the value. How much of this total value is in the transferable bit coming out of the model, and how much is the stuff that's specific to the owners? We're getting a range from like a third to a half of that. And when we look at like income yields, we're getting a huge range of returns, which is relevant for people who try to estimate businesses by taking incomes and dividing it by a single number. There's no, we're not even close to a single number. It's a huge amount of heterogeneity in the returns here.
Everything here is in this ADA thing, right? And so if we sped up trade,
yeah,
all problems go away. But that's just exogenous, how often we get to sit down and try to sell business.
Well, so that's, something we're going to, how frequent are those business transfers happening is something we're going to estimate from the data.
Well, it's a choice. Here it's imposed. In the world, it's a choice. You can sell your dentist shop every day if you feel like it. They choose not to.
Let's discuss that after. The choose not to. We'll talk to your dentist. Okay, so let me end, because I only have 5 minutes, with the tax and capital gains. So in this case, we introduce a tax on the gains, and the seller receives, 1 minus tau of that price if they sell, and then the government gets the rest. And here, like I was pointing out earlier, obviously there's now a tax base because there's something actually being transferred, something that would show up on that form 8594.
There's gonna be big effects on entry of these capital taxes, right? Because there was like zero profits ex ante. You're taxing ex post the winners, and
Yeah. So there's who enters, who sells, all these. God darn, keep hitting this.
You're gonna get to a new steady state where that's all taken care of, right? Sorry. You're going to get to a new steady state where people aren't.
Yeah, but that'll affect if you compare two worlds, one without and one with, yeah, we're changing all that. We're changing all those. Because that's determining equilibrium. So so what are the effects? There's two obvious ones: the fewer trades, and then lower investment in entry, as you predicted. The more interesting one is the tax incidence. And let me just, since I'm out of time, and I'd rather just show the picture. Here is the pre-tax and post-tax and no tax, and I'll draw in some.
Is the tax financing anything?
Is the tax? It's just
Financing anything?
we don't have no. Thrown in ocean like RG. So here we can see that you can get very depending on, and here this goes back to thinking about what Chris was saying, that different motives for sale, like if the price in pick any of these, post or pre-tax, there's a non-monotonicity. So there's a sweet spot in terms of getting to your optimal size, and that's going to determine these prices. But then the most kind of desperate are gonna bear the burden of these taxes. So it really matters, like if you have a huge amount of capital, getting rid of that isn't so easy because you got to find the person who wants that huge business in one shot because it's sold in one thing. So what we find interesting is that you can get it's not just incidence on the seller because they pay it, but because at different points or at different sizes of business, you have different scarcity of partners.
I think John's question about the arugula, I kept thinking back, is that in the arugula case, there's an intermediary, which is the supermarket. We don't buy from the farmers. What this model wants is intermediaries as well. Someone who buys a lot of capital from a lot of small guys, and then the buyers that want 17 times comes, here's all I have. They facilitate that trade. I wonder if did the model rule it out, or it's just not a rising endogenous?
Well, it's a little bit ruled out, right? Because we have you
match in this.
You match and you take the whole thing, and then there's also the frequency of matches.
It could be that some agents in your model are buying for the purposes of selling later on.
But they all are.
They all are doing it to some extent, so it is perhaps allowed. I'm just trying to sort of think
it's
together.
It's much together for the two reasons.
I get mushed together. That's right.
It's not they're buying a portfolio of businesses and they later sell off.
Exactly.
But in models of these type of markets and financial markets, usually we explicitly model an intermediary that has bigger. It's easier for them to trade.
And there's no notion of large buyer here. Anyway.
Yeah, and you're also thinking about an intermediate that can sell a little tiny piece.
Yeah, that maybe
which is not what's happening here.
Anyway.
And even in businesses that are franchised, you can't just sell one piece off. So I'll end it here, and I am happy to stay for questions. I'm here all day.
So how does this chart? How will depend on the IRS data? Number two, you're going to use IRS data.
Yeah.
To quantify the previous chart.
Yeah. So
how close is this now?
Yeah. So the IRS data right now we're using to kind of think about those key moments, which I buzzed by because I couldn't do it, but validate the model, make sure we're getting ratios of prices to income that look like data, getting ratios of the size of the buyers to the size of the sellers. We're looking before and after their sale at their financials? Do they look like our little
There's a chart right
businesses?
before this.
Oh, this one, the capital gains one?
Yeah, but what's the sense is this?
Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to look up. Look up the answer to this. This is a prediction, but it is thinking about kind of a key question in public finance: who bears the taxes? Now, the IRS people don't care less about this. They ultimately want a predictive tool to think about tax administration and tax compliance. So the key thing for them is to understand better these businesses that look like they have no income, no income, no income, no income, sale. Boom, lots of income. Because they didn't see any of this until it's sold. So understanding better the assets inside the business and the incomes that derive from those assets are of interest to the IRS.
Can you give us your punchline? Can we ask, given the number of questions, what are your punchline, Ellen, in terms of the tax policies? So should we tax realized sales? Should we tax before? How should we distribute the incidence among capital?
These are great questions, but we're not at that definitive punchline yet. It's more, I would say, we're trying to understand in a world like this some key questions related to tax policy, and where would kind of going back to John's, if we compared this world to one where the ADA was every second or the chunk size were really tiny, how would those answers differ?
Do you have revenue? I would assume that you start taxing things and there's all sorts of offsetting behaviors.
Yeah, there's some G that gets thrown out, but in a full-blown.
No, just less of it.
Hmm?
I'm sensing a Laffer curve here, that if you try to tax these capital gains, then the frequency of transactions goes down, that there's margins on which you're not getting revenue. Is that, I presume that's.
For sure that would happen, yeah, if you went too high.
Do you have a slide for us? Or?
No.
Well, not too high, just any. If I introduce this tax, they're going to change their behavior some way, and I'm not going to make as much money as I thought I was going to make.
You're not going to make as much.
Tax revenue rate.
Yeah, we can do the revenue, but yeah, that we can do that.
And what are the margins?
Yeah.
What are the margins on which to
Yeah.
adjust?
It's got confusing. It's 1 minus tau of the P, but the capital gains is only on the difference by which you bought the price.
We got to stop.
Oh, right.
Yeah, it's because you built it from zero.
Thank you.
Thank you.